Hi, I'm Julie Bolser. As the nation recognizes Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I'm pleased to welcome to the studio in New York today Mary Cappello. Mary is the author of the new breast cancer memoir called Back, My Reply to Cancer, My Return to Life, published by Allison Books. Described as a cancer memoir for the 21st century, Called Back is a highly original, literary, and intelligent and unflinching account of Cappello's experience with breast cancer. Mary Cappello is also a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Rhode Island. Mary, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
My first question for you is, why publish a memoir about a topic as intensely personal as breast cancer?
I don't think of breast cancer actually as intensely personal. I think it's, in a number of ways, a profoundly public sort of disease, and certainly a tremendously political one. So it's kind of interesting to begin on this note of the personal. Certainly, insofar as one is dealing with a part of one's body that is, I think, a center of our sex and sexuality, and that doesn't get talked about a whole lot in terms of breast cancer awareness and breast cancer circles, if you will. But that would seem to suggest that indeed we're entering into private territory, private and personal territory. And that's true. That is true. There's a way in which, once inside of the treatment regimes for cancer, you really have to fall back on yourself at the same time that, if you're lucky enough to have a good support system, that's of the essence. But I also think it's important to acknowledge the degrees of solitude that one experiences when one is inside of a treatment for cancer, and insofar as it requires that we be alone with ourselves in a kind of profound way. But at the same time, breast cancer is so pervasive, as we know. We hear the word epidemic, and yet that word becomes less abstract to me when every day I hear of someone else whom I know in my life, my particular small life, who's newly diagnosed. It's shocking, really. It's shocking. And so, yes, I guess my book, I don't think of it as a personal account so much as I think of it as an attempt to remember collectively, to help offer something toward a collective remembering of the kinds of things that I think don't maybe get addressed as much as they perhaps should or could where breast cancer is concerned.
I know that the first part of your book's title, Called Back, has a particular resonance for you. Could you talk a bit about what the title means and in what ways it applies to what readers encounter in the memoir?
Sure. First of all, it's Emily Dickinson's epitaph, and Emily Dickinson is a very important interlocutor for me. The phrase "called back," as far as we understand, these were the very last words that Dickinson recorded in a letter to her cousins. This constituted the entire letter. All that she wrote in the letter were the words "called back." So I love it for that. I love the way in which the phrase puts me immediately in touch with Emily Dickinson. But I certainly had in mind the terror and horror of being called back into mammography, possibly every woman's greatest fear. At the same time, the necessity as a writer to recall the experience. It really works on a number of different levels, and of course, when you enter into cancer regime, you're also required to respond in an array of ways to pretty complex situations. So the title is meant to work in those multiple ways.
Your memoir takes the readers through the stages of your diagnosis, your treatment, and then after your experience with breast cancer. When did you write the book? And as people are reading, what are they reading about?
Okay. Well, it does take readers through those stages and places, but I need to point out that it's interested in disrupting that trajectory. Because one of the things I'm very much interested in doing in this book is, on the one hand, acknowledging that when a woman enters into treatment for breast cancer, she enters into a highly ritualized space. our lives become very much routinized. For most women, these parts are very similar. The pieces of the ritual are very similar. Insofar as diagnosis, of course, is where we begin. We move usually into surgery, and then this is followed, depending on your situation, by chemotherapy and radiation. That ritualization has a way of taming one and rendering one docile and normalizing one, and the book is actually written in such a way to work against the taming effects of those rituals. And so, on the one hand, I want to acknowledge what you're acknowledging, which is that, yes, it will take a reader through those stages. But I don't think of my book, for example, as a redemption narrative. Even though, yes, you come out at the other end, I'm irredeemable, actually. And so I'm not interested in participating in that narrative convention, which is also part of one of the things that's bequeathed us by the culture. If we enter into breast cancer experience, we're also required to sort of talk about it and narrate it in particular ways. Now, when you ask me what it's about, I like to say that the book was written from the experience of breast cancer rather than being about breast cancer. And so the book is really more of a journey through the kinds of things that, being a person living in the United States in the 21st century, a woman and a lesbian dealing with breast cancer, the kinds of things that I was required to think about and that I would not have imagined ever thinking about. And so I like to say that the book is rendered in this expected way, by way of the 4 stages of the treatment regime, but that what happens inside of each passage, each section, is quite unexpected. And so, for example, in the surgery section, I end up meditating on the difference between being brushed by something, brushed up against by a person, by a disease, by death, the difference between that and being penetrated by a disease, by a surgeon,